I tell you what, it's not like the olden days. I'm Jake,
I'm Rosie.
and this is our podcast entitled Weekend Mornings, which is about weekend morning magazine shows. Now, as I mentioned at the end of the last podcast, it started with Swap Shop, which we didn't watch because we weren't alive, and then it was Saturday Superstore, which we also didn't watch because we weren't alive or were very small. But for us it started with Going Live, which ran from 1987 to 1992. Not all year round, but it quite often seemed to be on. It was on BBC One throughout Saturday mornings between sort of 9 or 9:15 sort of time and midday. And it was a chance for everyone who'd had a hard week at school, principally, I suppose, as it was children's telly, or perhaps work, the whole family, to sit and relax and enjoy and just not worry about things for a few hours on Saturday morning. Not even worry about phoning in and trying to swap your old Snoopy rubbers and things like on Swap Shop. And it was a very good idea, and one that the BBC really stuck with until, well, I suppose, until the end of Dick and Dom in the Bungalow sort of thing, which is certainly nowhere near in the same league as Going Live and Live and Kicking, but I think Swap Shop started in 76. They were probably doing it as standard for more than 40 years, so obviously a format that worked well for the BBC and children's television. So we just talk about Going Live and Live and Kicking, and then mention a few other magazine-style shows from Saturday and Sunday morning that we didn't watch so much or remember so fondly, but just we'll say one or two sentences about. I've already done the introduction to Going Live and then gone on a bit of a tangent, but it was presented throughout its run from 87 to 92 by Philip Schofield and Sarah Green. And, of course, Philip's comedy partner, foil, little puppet character, Gordon the Gopher, with whom he had previously appeared in the Broom Cupboard, as well as Trevor and Simon, who provided the show's comedy sketch show type stuff. Although I say it was presented throughout, Trevor and Simon actually took a year off Going Live at one point and were replaced by a duo called Nick and James, which nobody ever remembers because they weren't as good, and Trevor and Simon were enticed back with plenty of money, I'm sure. One very good part of Going Live for me was the cartoons, which is hardly anything new, and you could see those after school all the time. But I always used to enjoy having them as part of the Going Live experience as well. Indeed, that continued on into Live and Kicking, as I'll mention in a bit. But what cartoons do we associate with Going Live? Well, Muppet Babies is the principal one. I always liked that a lot more than the Muppet Show, which was having repeats at the time. And, of course, Thundercats, which also showed in the afternoons on CBBC. We didn't used to watch CBBC in the afternoons that much. Most of the Thundercats we used to watch was on Going Live, and we'll do a Thundercats podcast at some point, probably next year, because there's very interesting things to say about it. And later, that cartoon slot in Going Live was taken by Teenage Mutant Hero / Ninja Turtles in the height of their popularity, which we'll also talk about in a podcast in the future. And The Raccoons was another one, which we would exclusively watch during Going Live and probably wouldn't have watched otherwise, but it's easier to sit and watch The Raccoons than get up and do something else for 25 minutes.
I can hardly remember anything about Going Live. I remember that I thought Philip Schofield's name was Philip Schofield.
Oh, wow. You were young and naive.
I was. And I remember that I used to like Gordon the Gopher, and I didn't really realise a gopher was actually a sort of animal, because he didn't even look like a rodent or anything. I thought it was just a sort of name, or it might mean something like Gordon the Nutter, or something like that. And I can remember watching some of those cartoons, but I didn't really know that we watched them during Going Live. And I vaguely remember when you would phone up and do the computer game thingy.
Ah, yes. Again, this shows the 2-year difference between us, because I think of going live as a Saturday morning thing and remember watching these things as part of it quite vividly. But yeah, they had the phone-in games with Sarah Green, they had Feed the Dog and Feed the Frog, and some of that continued into Live and Kicking, didn't it? I was mentioning Grab It Rabbit as a game in that vein. It reminded me that's actually from Live and Kicking.
Yes, I remember Zoe Ball doing that, and she had an actual rabbit with her called Starsky, and our mummy told us that it was a reference to Starsky and Hutch, and I don't know if you knew what that was, but I certainly didn't know what that was at that stage, and probably most of the target audience didn't either, but doubtless Zoe Ball knew all about it.
And you'd have to try and direct the character, be it the frog or the dog or the rabbit, to do certain things in this video game. Stuff that modern children wouldn't acknowledge as a video game at all, I'm sure.
The dog was quite anthropomorphic, wasn't he? He was dressed up as a chef, and he had this frying pan, and there was food falling out of the sky, and you had to tell him to go left or right to catch the food in this frying pan. And did you get, like, bonus for bones or something?
You did, and then the big prize was the golden bone.
And in Grab It Rabbit there was a golden carrot, wasn't there? They're all after food, these things.
They are. Feed the animals. So it's all in the same sort of vein there. Before we don't talk about the cartoons, actually, we must say one thing we both remember from Muppet Babies, which was a competition where you had to write in. This is a fantastic aspect of all these Saturday morning magazine shows.
I don't remember those.
I think you will.
No, I won't. Well, we'll see.
Where you write in and enter competitions, or as Philip Schofield directs, you send yourself an envelope which is empty.
Yes, I've seen that on outtake shows, and I've also seen Gordon getting attacked by this little yappy dog. So that's why I know going live could be very amusing, but I don't remember anything specifically happening at the time.
And you could send them in your pictures of the cartoons and your letters about God knows what. It was very interactive in that way. You couldn't tweet to them or whatever like you do nowadays and be that interactive. You just had to send your letter in and wait week by week, and it was much better for us and much more character building.
Sometimes you could phone them up and actually talk to them.
Yes, indeed. Particularly at the end when it was time for the celebrity phone-in.
Where you would phone and ask the band why they were so effing crap.
Yes, that was 5-star, wasn't it?
Another outtake there.
So one of the things you could do was enter these little competitions, and one of them was to draw Nanny from Muppet Babies, who was the grown-up character who ran this kind of nursery where the Muppet Babies all went, and you never saw her top half. You just saw her legs. And the competition was to design the head of Nanny. And the best idea that we thought anyone had for Nanny was, do you remember?
I remember you telling me about it. I don't actually remember seeing it on the telly. I only remember you talking about it, but she was a goat.
Yes, Nanny Goat. And in those days, many children still thought of the word nanny as referring to goats rather than their grandmothers. So we thought that one should have won the competition. I'm not sure if it did. But other interesting bits of going live included Philip Schofield and Emma Forbes cooking and making a terrible mess, and Gordon getting involved, and there's outtakes of that can be seen quite a lot.
She loses a ring in some mix of some kind, and she tries to tell you, or Philip tries to tell you, that if you drop a bit of eggshell in your mix, you use the rest of the eggshell to scoop it out, and it's not working for them, and they go, oh, I'm just going to get a spoon. But actually, that does work for me.
There's a lot of hilarity with Philip and Emma cooking. Another segment I used to enjoy was growing pains, where the children would write in and say, sometimes my dad hits me, my mum drinks alcohol and neglects me, I have to look after my 5 younger brothers and do all the washing, and things like that. And Sarah Green and Dr. Phil would try and sort it out. And there was this one very affecting one I remember. And I thought, oh, I'm glad I'm not that person, where this boy was having terrible abuse from his father and ended up, thanks to the intervention of going live, going to live with his maternal grandmother. Evidently his mother was dead. And that was really going live, making a real difference to people's lives. I mean, what's Esther Ranson and Childline got? Growing Pains hasn't. endurance, I suppose. But that was always a memorable bit. Makes one realise how lucky one is not to be in those terrible situations like the children in the letters. And another little insert show, which isn't a cartoon, is Double Dare, which was your standard sort of gungy game show presented by Peter Simon, and that kind of ran concurrently with Going Live and finished when Going Live finished, but then was reincarnated as Run the Risk in Live and Kicking.
I remember Double Dare being on the telly and Peter Simon being there and we watched it, but I don't remember anything about what actually happened.
No, dare it, double dare it back, take the physical challenge. I can't remember the rules, and then there's this kind of obstacle course at the end and lots of guns for Peter Simon to fall into.
Sounds exactly the same as Run the Risk.
Pretty much is, except they didn't sit on sort of podiums and hit the buzzers with their feet like they did in Run the Risk.
And Shane Ritchie wasn't there asking them the general knowledge questions.
Yes, Run the Risk is basically the same thing, but more sort of cool, more 90s, man. Oh yes, and I thought I might just mention a couple of things I remember Trevor and Simon doing. They had this ongoing joke song called Swing Your Pants, which I had only just become familiar with the term pants at school. We call them knickers always, and they were referring to trousers in Swing Your Pants, and it got terribly confusing.
It's very American.
Yes, they used to have a laundrette sketch, and their recurring gripe was, we don't do duvets, you know, the sort of thing. And they did various other bits and bobs as well, and interacted with some of the celebrity guests. And the main reason for the phone-in, unless you're playing Feed the Dog or something like that, was, as we mentioned, to ring in and ask questions to whoever was on the show, be it Kylie Minogue or someone else. Usually it was Kylie Minogue. And usually they managed not to have people ring in and abuse 5-star or whatever, but occasionally one does slip through. Who's on line 1? Who's on line 2? Etc. from Sarah Green. Really, Live and Kicking followed straight on the heels of Going Live, and is pretty much just the same show by another name. We didn't actually really watch the first 3 years of Live and Kicking, which were presented by Andy Peters and Emma Forbes. We saw bits of them, we didn't really sit and watch it, and John Barrowman, of course, was around during the first series, and then I think he moved on to doing Electric Circus, which was a kind of videos and computer games and electric entertainment segment within Live and Kicking.
I can tell you one thing, vaguely, about those days, because I saw it on some sort of Remember This documentary. Emma Forbes was there, and John Barrowman, and you watched this, phoned up and said, can you remember the awkward situation you were in when some celebrity guest was there? And I know you watched it because we were saying, oh, John Barrowman, we haven't seen him for a while, we haven't seen him since that movie game show, and then suddenly he was everywhere and it got really annoying. But then they showed a clip of this thing, and it was another phone-in where people were saying things that they shouldn't have, got put through with a fake question, obviously. And it was some sort of singer or something, and this girl asked him, my friends and I were just wondering if we could see your donger.
That's a good one. Evidently, sometime during this period, I think in the second series, someone mentioned at one point, the leprechauns came in. Puppet leprechauns, Mr. Sage and Mr. Onion, who operated, voiced by Don Austin and John Eccleston, who also did The Wolves on Wolfit, which was on the CITV. And they were very much an established part of the show when we joined it in the September time of 1996. I'm not sure if Mitch was new at that point, Mitch being the voiceover guy for Live and Kicking. He may have been in it already with Andy and Emma. But in 1996, Going Live had a whole new lease of life with Zoe Ball and Jamie Theakston, the dream team of Saturday morning magazine's show presentation. Or perhaps the new dream team after Philip Schofield and Sarah Green. And yes, it really is. I thought this at the time, and it's true, it really is Going Live by another name. We've already mentioned that Double Dare continued in pretty much the same show in the form of Run the Risk. And I thought at the time, and it's true, this Live and Kicking really is pretty much going live by another name. They continued with the cartoons, not the same ones, but we used to watch on it and quite enjoy. The Rugrats.
We watched the Rugrats on it so much that we got sick of it by the end and never really wanted to watch it again.
Yeah, that's true. And Spider-Man, or as Mitch used to call it, Spider-Man.
Godzilla.
Godzilla was on it at one point.
Which I don't think a lot of people really remember now.
And other non-cartoony inserts included Keenan and Kel.
Very funny. Smart guy.
So usually contained a giggle or two. So, they were showcasing some other children's shows within Live and Kicking as they had done in Going Live. We'll mention Trevor and Simon here because that series that started in 1996, continued into the spring of 97, was actually Trevor and Simon's last series of anything ever.
And I'm sure they used to do We Don't Do Duvets, and they did Pickling Time, where they would pickle a different thing, and there would be one who'd pickle something fairly sensible, and then the other one would pickle something stupid for a joke.
Yeah, Simon was pickling Jeff, the main pickler, and Trev, they called him by then, was Joby, his dim-witted assistant who would pickle something inappropriate. I suppose, actually, they weren't really things you'd normally pickle in real life, but...
Were they food?
Yes, well, I remember around Bonfire Night one we had this week, we've pickled a firework, and Joby's pickled some fire or something, and it hasn't worked. Oh, Joby, it wasn't exactly comedy gold.
I think it was funnier than we're making it sound, though, wasn't it?
It probably was,
to get a giggle out of it.
We did, yes. I think you need Trevor and Simon to do it, really, to get the appreciation out of it. But Zoe and Jamie did 2 more series after that, so up to sort of spring 99 sort of time. And in those 2 series, Trevor and Simon were replaced with, or had to be replaced with, Ben, Jez and Rich.
I actually like them better.
They used to do a lot of amusing sketches, such as Men in Trousers, which was a Men in Black spoof, and you sent them pictures of aliens, or...
pictures that had turned out weird, so it looked like your mum had 2 heads or something.
And they had Watch Out, which was Watchdog. Nowhere on this does it say don't stamp on it with a large metal replica boot.
That's when they're giving it the okay because it hasn't broken, and then they break it, and then they say it's not okay because it doesn't say not to stamp on it. And they built up to that. Before that, they were testing out, like, a book or something and putting it in a bucket of water and ruining it and saying it doesn't say on here don't put it in a bucket of water, which is very satirical actually, because people sometimes would have valid complaints for Watchdog, like my child's Halloween costume caught fire, or my insurance company wouldn't pay out when a pigeon ruined my chimney because it said it would cover animals, but a pigeon wasn't an animal. It was a real one that I remember. But also sometimes people would have stupid things they would say to Watchdog. So that was the point of that sketch.
And the other big one was the staff room. And we have to mention the staff room. At last we can say this is where we get our little introductory phrase for the Olden Days podcast from. In the staff room, Ben, Jez and Rich were each a teacher. There was Mr. Slack, the PE teacher who never got out of his chair.
And they got that name from Mr. Slat, who was amusing everybody at the time on the sitcom Chalk, wasn't he?
That's right.
We used to enjoy him very much.
And he's Rich, who was a musician as well as a comedian. You can see he's written songs for things in more recent times, such as Mongrels.
Amusing, silly songs. Yeah. It does it for Charlie Brooker sometimes as well.
That's right, so he does. So he's a very talented person.
And he wrote the Crazies song, and they would be the Crazies, which was a sort of Beatles take-off, wasn't it?
That's right, yes, I like the Crazies. And now, which is Ben and which is Jez?
Oh, Ben's the little one. I'm little Benny Crazy, and Jez is the tall one.
Right, so Jez was Mr. Wazzock, the new teacher, and he started trying to change his name and have new names and always put the wrong thing on the form. So he became Mr. 24 or Mr. Birmingham or something, the sort of thing. And they may have settled on Mr. Wazzock in the end. But he was like in Chalk, he was the kind of new teacher from the outside who found the existing teachers a bit weird. And then was, I can't remember his name.
Mr. Moody.
Mr. Moody, the history teacher. And the big joke was that he was such a history teacher. He'd been teaching since the dawn of time, sort of thing. He was supposed to be old and out of touch. And he would come in and go, "What a morning," and complain about stuff, and then say at the end, "I tell you what, it's not like the old days." And that's where we got the Olden Days from, which probably nobody has realised so far, so there you are. And we stuck Olden instead of old to match with the little phrase that the person who was being tutored said to Rosie, which you can hear all about in our introductory podcast. And it was always very amusing, the staff room anyway. They had the guests come in and be extra characters, and Zoe used to come in and be Mr. Ball, the headmaster, with a beard on. Great fun.
Ah, very funny.
And Jamie was Jamie, the head boy, come in his school uniform.
I mean, he was fantastically tall.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Great stuff there. Great fun. Great way to start your weekend. So yes, I liked Ben, Jez and Rich just as much as Trevor and Simon, if not more. And of course they continued with things like the Celebrity Phone-In and the Rabbit, of course, the game. And they used to do sketches with the leprechauns, and it was just a lot of fun, really. Jamie and Mr. Blobby used to do a little phone-in game.
Mr. Blobby was there.
Blobby's Baggage, Blobby's Bistro. Mr. Blobby used to find prizes for you if you rung in and answered a question. Great fun.
They were doing that. There would be celebrities there for that. Sometimes or always. They were doing it once, and this boy band was there, and they were all drunk.
Oh, God.
I'm not sure if it was Westlife or A1 or something else, but I do remember that.
It's the trouble with live TV. Yes, and of course, going live and kicking, and the early stuff, I'm sure, did have some live music on it, usually or always. That's why there would be boy bands there, or Louise from Eternal there, or whoever. Natalie and Brulia.
All Saints.
Etc.
Spice Girls. Jerry Halliwell after she left Spice Girls. I remember Live and Kicking well and like going live. And they used to have Cloud9, where Zoe would phone you up because your dad or someone had written in and said, "My son really, really wants to land aeroplanes at the airport." I remember this one. He was very much into landing aeroplanes, and Zoe showed us this video of him that his family had made of him landing his dad's car with ping pong bats.
Oh, yes!
And the poor boy must have been so embarrassed. But anyway, she would, well, I don't suppose Zoe personally did it, but the BBC would arrange for you to experience your dream. So this guy must have got to go to the airport and do something with the aeroplanes. Mostly people wanted to meet celebrities. There was one where a girl wanted to be a sort of TV manager person. I don't think it's a floor manager, because one thing that she got to do was phone up and book the Spice Girls. And this is true. The woman who was kind of directing her around and helping her was saying, "Who would you like at Live and Kicking on this date? It's your favourite band and stuff." And she said, "Oh, the Spice Girls." And she phoned up and said, "Can I book the Spice Girls for Live and Kicking on this date?" And someone on the other end of the phone was saying, "Oh, yes, you can." And it was quite a long way off, 6 months or more. And I remember thinking, I'm going to remember that date and see if they have the Spice Girls. And they did.
Ah, it was true.
Yes, I was very pleased that it wasn't all a lie. They didn't mention that this Cloud9 girl had booked them. They were just saying, "Oh, next week we've got the Spice Girls," and then the Spice Girls were there. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yes, so again, it's very interactive in that way.
You mentioned Electric Circus earlier, where they used to tell us about the films, and I used to quite like to hear what films were coming up, because we used to go to the cinema quite a lot in those days, didn't we? See films that we thought we'd enjoy. And one I do remember is Alicia's Attic reviewing The Man in the Iron Mask. And it made me think, gosh, Alicia's Attic is thick, because the way they explained the film, The Man in the Iron Mask, was to say, well, there's a couple of twins, and one of them's rich and one of them's poor, and they swap places.
Yeah, they thought it was the Prince and the Pauper.
They didn't get it at all, did they?
No, they didn't at all.
But they did do some very good songs, Alicia's Attic.
But yeah, Zoe and Jamie really, as I say, were a dream presenting team. You can't plan chemistry like that. And during what must have been their second series, they branched out into this segment called L&K Friday, which was on at about 4:30 to 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and was additional live kicking. And, well, didn't really add a lot to it, did it?
No, they didn't do anything that was half as interesting as what they did on the Saturday, I thought.
No, but they did have a celebrity for a kind of mini phone-in. And that is what I said last time when we were talking about this upcoming podcast. You can phone in and abuse Peter Andre.
And who wouldn't want to do that?
Because it was Zoe Ball and Peter Andre on L&K Friday, and somebody had got through, again, fake question I'm sure, to tell Peter Andre he was a commercial bore. And, well, sure, everyone agrees with that, apart from Peter Andre, who went off on this sort of tirade, which is always the trouble with live TV. And then, during Zoe and Jamie's third and final series, L&K Friday was back for its second and final series, but they didn't have Zoe and Jamie presenting it. They just did the Saturday show. They had Steve Wilson, who'd been around CBBC for a bit, and this woman called Liz Fraser, who I've never seen before or since. Was this a sign, perhaps, that Zoe and Jamie were on the way out? Well, they were doing their final series on the Saturdays at the same time.
I was amusing you recently, wasn't I, with my memory of what Liz used to look like. I said she looked like All Saints, because she had enormous trousers and hair dyed the same colour as her skin.
That's right, yes, exactly what she was like, and All Saints were like that too.
I think she was alright, but she was no Zoe Ball. And do you remember how Steve used to get out his keyboard all the time and make the celebrity guests sing with him?
Yes, which worsened when he became the main presenter on the following series after Zoe and Jamie had left.
Before we talk about that, we should probably mention Hit, Miss or Maybe.
Oh, yes.
That was great fun, I always thought. Zoe Ball would sit there with three celebrity guests, and they'd have these giant plastic-coloured hands with a thumb sticking up if you pointed it upwards, or down if you pointed it down. And I remember Brian Blessed doing this and being very amusing. I thought it was absolutely atrocious. Victoria Beckham, I think she was Beckham by then, Billy Piper, things like that, and Zoe would show them upcoming singles, and they'd say whether they liked them or not, and then they'd hold their giant thumb up or down or in the middle, hit, miss, or maybe. And they were so stupid, the celebrities, half of them picked up the hand during the discussion. They didn't wait for the bit where they had to actually pick up the hand and go down the line, and we'd see what they thought. But at the beginning, you'd get these clips of music videos from various time periods, and the celebrities would have to write down what they thought they were. So, like, if there was a clip from the Wannabe video, you'd write the Spice Girls Wannabe, and there were 5, so you got marks out of 10. And if you won, Zoe would give you the Anorak Award, and it was a sort of actual small anorak on a kind of trophy frame, which was really fun. And one thing I do remember is that when Billie Piper was there, something made her say, "I have no clue." And then on Monday at school, everyone kept saying, "I have no clue," if you asked them anything. And I thought, well, you've just nicked that off Billie Piper. Now, I wouldn't have thought that. I would have just thought Billy, wouldn't I? Because that was her name in those days. I think you're so cool.
And that gets repeated around our house to this day at times.
Yes.
I have no clue.
I was disparaging of it at the time. I thought, I got you think of your own thing to say, but then you just pick things up and pick phrases up, don't you? So that was hit, miss, or maybe, anyway.
Yeah, great fun.
Of course, do you remember Mambo number 5? I expect you do.
Yes.
And do you remember that he tried to do a second single?
Yes, I've got a girlfriend all around the world or something like that.
And then he completely disappeared, didn't he? That single flopped and he disappeared. And do you remember the amusing comment Jack Ryder made?
Yes, he was surprised he'd got a girlfriend anyway.
Oh, did he say that?
Yes, what else?
He said about the song, he said, well, he did Mambo number 5, And then he said, yeah, I'm going to do it again. Because it was the exact same song, practically. Which probably is why everyone was bored of it and didn't buy the second single. And then poor old Jack Ryder disappeared shortly after that, after leaving EastEnders, getting run over by Martin and dying.
Yes, he could do no wrong when he was on Hit Missile, maybe, and then poof, disappeared. But apparently he lived on the fringes of St. Albans with Kim Marsh once, which was quite interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing to say about Zoe and Jamie's final series is that Mr. Onion, the leprechaun, left the show at that point and was replaced by this character called Shamrock, a female leprechaun, the long-lost sister of Mr. Sage and Mr. Onion. And so Sage and Shamrock did all the leprechaun stuff.
It's a good thing it was Onion that left, actually, because Onion and Shamrock wouldn't work so well, would it?
No, they'd have to call her something else. But then there wouldn't be anything so good. And then Mr. Onion was back for the series after Zoe and Jamie left, and Shamrock was still supposed to be there, but she kind of got overshadowed by Mr. Onion with the good old Sage and Onion partnership back again. The shame for Shamrock. And as we mentioned, that series was presented by Steve Wilson, who's kind of been promoted for Ellen K. Friday, and there was no Ellen K. Friday that time, and Emma Ledden, who was Irish, and there was no Ellen K. Friday at all, so just them two on the Saturday show. They didn't have Ben, Jez and Rich. They had Supergirlie as their kind of in-house comedians, but you didn't see that much of them.
They only really did one thing, didn't they? Where they pretended that they were working in the makeup and costume department, so the celebrities would come in for their makeup and they would be amusing, do an amusing sketch with them, and they were quite good, actually.
They were good, and two Australian women, they were very good at what they were doing, which wasn't that much.
I remember that the blonde one in one sketch was saying that Rolf Harris, who was probably there at the time, he used to go on Live and Kicking.
Yes, we're not allowed to talk about him now, of course.
Oh, well.
We can on this.
Yes, I'm going to do it anyway. She was saying that he was her uncle or something like that. And he probably came and said that he wasn't.
Uncle Rolf.
And then the other Supergirlie was saying maybe, because she'd started saying that other celebrities were related to her, that was it. And the other Supergirlie was saying, well, maybe your mum just told you that they were your family as a sort of fun game, and she wasn't really telling you the truth. And I can't remember their names.
No, not at all.
So, the blonde one was saying, oh, you know who's going to be really upset about this? And the other one said, who? And she goes, Grandpa Santa Claus, which I thought was quite funny. And the other thing was that she thought that Craig David was two different people. Craig and David. So she was a sort of thick one, I suppose. And the other one was like a straight man.
Simple but effective Saturday morning magazine show comedy there, I think.
I remember S Club 7 were there once, and she said, oh, Rachel, show us your thing. And Rachel Stevens said, my what? And she was actually quite funny about that. Rachel Stevens was the most charismatic one in S Club 7, but not good enough to win Strictly.
So it was definitely worth watching still with that 99/2000 series with Steve and Emma, but of course it was never quite the same. And then it did have a final series in 2000/01 that we didn't watch because it was completely different presenters, completely new format. But it just looked like rubbish, and it obviously was because the show was cancelled very quickly. And then, as I say, the BBC did continue with In Daft Bungalow and things, but I guess in some ways we'd grown out of it by then. In some ways it was no longer the olden days and it had all gone complete crap anyway. So that was the end of our Saturday morning magazine show story, really. But we always remember those Live and Kicking mornings in particular when we were teenaged and stressed and living somewhere we didn't really like living. And
once we were watching it and that man came on it through the French windows, I think.
That's right, the man who was going to buy the house came and spied on us. Fortunately, we weren't actually naked, but could have been, you know, he was damn lucky. So yes, it brought us a great deal of comfort in those times, and will always be looked back upon fondly. There were other weekend magazine shows, sometimes on Saturdays at break, sometimes on Sundays. I mean, looking back far enough, you've got things like Ghost Train with Nobby the Sheep, which used to have interesting cartoons on it like Scooby-Doo. And then moving on a little later, you would have things like Motormouth and What's Up Doc on CITV, which we didn't really watch. But what we did watch on ITV sometimes on Sunday mornings was the Disney Club, where we used to enjoy Chip and Dale, Rescue Rangers, and Teen Angel, the original version, and the Gummy Bears.
I used to quite like Bonkers as well when that was on, although I don't remember it too well now, but I do remember one amusing bit.
Yes,
So I think I like the whole thing.
he's a bobcat who's a cop. It's quite strange because the other cops aren't animals.
I don't even really remember. I just remember this bit where he's on this railway track in a tunnel in like a cart thing with somebody, and they're worried about going through this tunnel and the rails, and then Bonkers is saying, don't worry, look, there's the light at the end of the tunnel, and then there's this train whistle, it's a train coming to run them over, and I thought that was hilarious, but I can't remember anything else about it.
Then coming further into the late 90s, we have Fully Booked, which was set or joke set in a hotel and had interesting guests and taught us how to put on a duvet cover and was always worth watching.
There was a Highland cow called Morag.
Yes.
And there was a thing where one of the presenters would go around doing a treasure hunt or something.
That treasure hunt insert was very good. When Raven first came on, I said it was a cross between Nightmare and that treasure hunt sort of thing where they go around Scotland digging up buried treasure. Indeed it was in many ways. And another one that was on CITV was Scratchy and Co., which again we didn't watch that much, but it was interesting when Tim Whitnell from Michelangelo, of course, was on there,
telling us that he wrote the music
and proving it by looking at the credits. Mark Spate on good form there, sadly missed in the world of children's television nowadays.
And Elliot Henderson Boyle was there, and we talked in other podcasts about how he turns up in everything.
That's right.
Mr. Bean and Watership Down, mostly.
Yes, he just sat there in the picture frame as Reg with the black plastic wig on, mouthing the lines that someone else was overdubbing in a deep voice, and, well, it must have been quite tedious in many ways. But Elliot Henderson Boyle, ever the professional, came back and did it every week. And perhaps the other big one, which was actually on as a rival to Live and Kicking, was SMTV Live on ITV.
I sometimes used to sit and watch that all the way through. It must not have been a day when Live and Kicking was on, or when it was the non-Zoe and Jamie series or something.
Yes, I think it used to go on after Live and Kicking had finished, later in the year, I mean.
So that must be when I watched it, and they used to have S Club 7 on there quite a lot, Westlife and A1, and the thing I mostly used to like about it was that Ant and Dec were the presenters. I like Ant and Dec, and Cat Dealey was helping them out, so they were Ant, Dec and Cat, and they used to read our letters, and they used to play that Wait a Minute, Mr. Postman song, and then they used to do this dance to it, and one Dec messed up the dance and got the giggle, which was amusing. And they had this weird thing once where they were doing a blind date parody, but I can't remember what the point of it was they were doing. It was some boy band. Maybe Kat was the contestant and she had to choose somebody out of the boy band for some reason. Sometimes they used to have the same exact guests as Live and Kicking, and we used to say, oh look, all those guest celebrity segments must be pre-recorded, because Live and Kicking had them for the live phone-in. One of my favourite things ever is Wonky Donkey, of course, where they would show you the stuffed toy donkey with one leg and say, he's a donkey and he's got one leg, so he's a wonky donkey. And then they would give you a different one and you would have to phone up and work out what it was. And people were terribly thick about it, and Dec would get so frustrated when they were giving ideas that didn't rhyme. There was this bear with a wig on. Everyone kept saying hair bear, but that wasn't it, because it has to be an adjective. The answer was actually fair bear. People were saying brown bear. And Dec was going, it has to rhyme, brown bear doesn't rhyme, and he got so cross, and he was on a documentary about this sort of thing within living memory, getting frustrated all over again about how people would phone up with answers that didn't rhyme. There was one where it was a regal eagle. It had like a crown and one of those cloaks on, and everyone was saying legal eagle, and that wasn't it. No one could get regal eagle, and I would sit there thinking, God, how thick. And I remember nice mice. There was somewhere they would have to say something, and the mice were saying, would you like another cup of tea, and things like that. And one of my favourite things that ever happened was, it was comic relief or something. Stephen Fry was up on stage with Hand and Deck saying how many wonky donkeys he could get in a minute or something, and they were pulling him out of the box. He was talking through the process of working them out. Oh, well, it's a cat and it's very large, so it's a fat cat or whatever. And he got loads, and he was really good at it. And another thing that was really good on SMTV Live was Chums, of course, where they'd have this sort of flat set, and obviously it was a takeoff of Friends, and they were doing this thing where Deck and Cat had Erst, like Ross and Rachel, and Deck had this catchphrase where he'd say something like, perhaps today's the day when I tell Cat that I love her, or something like that. And there'd be misunderstandings and things happening, and the celebrity guests would come and join in the sketch. I remember there was one where Jerry Halliwell was trying to sell them cosmetics, and either Ant or Deck had put on this face cream or something, and something had gone wrong, and they were going, oh no, let's look at the directions on the product, what does it say? And Jerry Halliwell's going, directions for men, do not use, oh no, directions for men, do not use, which was quite amusing, because it makes you disappear or something. And the really very funny, memorable one was when they did Buds, which was American Chums, which was a bit weird because it was based on Friends anyway. But I've always slightly preferred Deck's Hand, and the funniest bit is when he's coming in with this burger, and he's saying, they didn't put any cheese in this burger, I'm gonna sue their ass, which made us laugh a lot.
I like the Chums with James Michael Tyler from Friends, Gunther from Friends, in it. He came in and played a very proper English butler or something, as a joke. Other wonky donkeys I remember, in the same vein as Nice Mice, was Deep Sheep, where the sheep was having a voiceover going, I am a sheep, therefore, blah, blah, blah. And there was Golfin Dolphin I like.
Ah, brilliant.
We had a phase of recording SMTV Live while Live and Kicking was going on, and then flicking through it for interesting bits, such as the ones you've just heard about.
Oh, that's how we knew they had the same guests.
Yeah, and one of the main triggers for that was that they were showing this Nicktoon that I was quite interested to see on SMTV Live called Angry Beavers, which we did quite enjoy, didn't we?
Yes, that was very amusing. I think it got quite bad quite quickly, didn't it?
Quite quickly, yeah.
But the first series, it was very funny.
First episode's quite good. In the first half, they build their dam, Norbert and Daggett, and then in the second half, they stay up all night and watch a scary movie and freak out, and the clock stops and they don't realise that they've stayed up so long. It's the future, you know, the sort of thing.
Is that the one where they're making prank calls?
I think so.
Do you have chicken necks? Try wearing a turtleneck sweater kind of thing.
And we also used to watch, which was their other kind of main cartoon, Cow and Chicken, which is an absolutely weird and strange and ugly and gross out comedy to the max sort of thing. Most of the characters were done by Charlie Adler, who perhaps was still bitter from not being given a role in Animaniacs.
Funnily enough, when you were talking about Nanny earlier, I was thinking about Cow and Chicken, because in some cartoons, like Muppet Babies, where it's all from the child's perspective, you can only see the adult legs, and in Cow and Chicken, as a joke, you would only ever see Mum and Dad's legs, even if they were in the car or something.
Yes.
There's a shot of them in the car, and the legs are sticking up, so you can see them through the window.
That level of surreality and more abounding in Cow and Chicken. Very strange cartoon.
I've just remembered Deck's catchphrase was, perhaps today's the day I'm going to kiss her, in Chums.
So there we are, a pretty full rundown of our Saturday morning magazine show memories.
What about Parallel 9?
Oh yes, Parallel 9 was another BBC one, which was in the kind of going live and kicking off season. And it has 3 series, and the first one's very different from the next 2. Parallel 9's a sort of prison complex. And this character called Mercator is this prisoner who only gets to exist or something on Saturday mornings and uses the time to talk to pop stars and look at viewers' drawings of Sonic the Hedgehog and things like that.
I thought it was supposed to be space.
Yes, it was a prison complex on another planet.
Oh, right. Because there was this alien character as well, wasn't there? He had a high voice and he went around annoying the celebrities.
Well, that is in the very, very different Series 2 and 3.
Oh, right.
Where the space, alien, different planet kind of aspect is very much amped up, and it's not a prison complex anymore, Parallel Line. It's just this kind of wacky planet with interesting characters such as the little green man with the high voice, Brian the dinosaur.
I don't really remember it that well, but I do remember we used to watch it.
A different Mercator, and in Series 2 and 3 they also had Lucinda Cowden from Neighbours, who used to be Melanie on Neighbours, in this caravan that would beam the guests up to Parallel 9, so kind of closer link to our world in that way.
The only thing I can really remember is that Madge was on it as a celebrity guest. And Charleston, that's her name.
Yes, they often used to have neighbours on Parallel 9. And the only kind of linking character between the three series was the Taupe, who's this kind of computer who's sort of huge crystals and flashing lights. And it's very out there and quite unsure of itself at time, Parallel 9. And as you can tell, one that can be overlooked. Not remembered with such fondness as some of these other things. But yes, definitely worth mentioning there at the end. Yep, it was always a bit of a drag going to school and wasting your time, and things like Live and Kicking and its ilk certainly help to relax us and keep us sane and just give our minds a little rest on those weekend mornings. That is something that was very important and that will always be remembered fondly. Join us again next time for a new podcast on
Jurassic Park and its sequels.
Until then, good night out there.
Whatever you are.